Will come to order. This is a meeting of the Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, and I would like to thank the distinguished witnesses. First, performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, Mr. John Hill, the Vice Chief of Space Operations, General David Thompson, the Director of the National Reconnaissance Office, Dr. Christopher Scalise, Associate Director of Operations for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Major General Charles Cleveland, and GAO Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisitions, Mr. John Ludwigson. We're honored to have this level of expertise within the department and intelligence community and to have them testify today at the hearing. It's been 2 years since the subcommittee has had a hearing on space acquisition. And in my opinion, hardly any topic in DoD is more important than this one. We've seen the overdue establishment of the Space Force, the reestablishment of the Space Command, and public acknowledgement of the many threats we face from abroad. I'm hopeful that the department will use this opportunity to accelerate and improve space acquisition within the Space Force. General Hyten, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has pointed out that the next generation of OPIR is still planning on giving us, as he calls it, quote, big, juicy targets to orbit, instead of the more distributed, less vulnerable architecture that we could be choosing. And he personally has encountered numerous articles in DoD to having new and improved architectures. So if the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has difficulties, I've got difficulties. We've got to make sure this works. I'll turn now to my ranking member, Mr. Turner, for any opening remarks he's got, but I would like to take a point of personal privilege. I'm wearing my Predators tie. We won in double overtime last night, so it's an amazing thing for a Nashville-based hockey team to be doing so well again. Mr. Turner.
Chairman, thank you so much, and thank you for holding this important hearing. I agree with you. This is one of the most important topics, perhaps besides nuclear modernization, that we're dealing with. We continually hear from General Raymond the issue of the provocative actions that China and Russia are taking in space. And we know that it's going to take not only our working defensively, but also in the manner in which we deploy and design our architecture. Forward to hearing from the witnesses today as to how they see that evolving. Also, since the Biden administration is delivering its budget late May, we're going to be dealing most likely with the CR, and I'd love to hear from the witnesses as to how this may affect their operations, knowing that in space, so many of the things that we do are single projects, and that they may be more particularly impacted by CRs than other functions. With that, I'll submit my written statement for the record, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The gentleman's comments are well taken. Without objection, any opening statement is accepted for the record. Let's now hear from our first witness, Mr. Hill.
Chairman Cooper, Ranking Member Turner, distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's an honor to testify before you today, along with my distinguished colleagues. You have my written statement. I will summarize it, and with your permission, have it placed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. This subcommittee well understands the importance of space-based capabilities to our national security in this era of destabilizing challenges from Russia and undeniable strategic competition with China. The increasing threats to those capabilities are also well known. As Secretary Austin has testified, the growth of Chinese and Russian counterspace capabilities presents the most immediate and serious threats to U.S., allied, and partner space activities. Moreover, Russia and China view space as critical to modern warfare and consider the use of counterspace capabilities as both a means of reducing U.S. military effectiveness and winning future wars. As these developments portend, the United States must now be prepared for conflict to extend to or even originate in space. But to be clear, such a conflict would not be a space war distinct from terrestrial war, but would rather represent the extension of traditional armed conflict into the space domain of human endeavor. Within the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, we are focused on the integration of strategy, policy, plans, and appropriate capabilities to develop a space posture that contributes to integrated cross-domain deterrence by conveying clearly to competitors and any potential adversary the inadvisability of military aggression, including attacks on U.S. space capabilities or those of our allies and partners. The 2020 Defense Space Strategy, which my office prepared, addresses these challenges of deterrence, as well as the challenges of crisis de-escalation and warfare extending to space along 4 lines of effort. First, we are building comprehensive military advantages in space. Second, we are integrating space into national, joint, and combined operations. Third, we are shaping the strategic environment to enhance domain stability and reduce the potential for miscalculation. And fourth, we are enhancing space cooperation with our international partners, our commercial entities, and our interagency partners. Finally, in support of the National Security Strategic Guidelines, my office also leads DoD's participation in the U.S. government's space diplomatic initiatives, which currently center on establishing voluntary non-binding standards of responsible behavior and on exposing the disingenuous space arms control initiatives of Russia and China. Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to have played a part in the collaborative and bipartisan efforts of the executive and legislative branches over the past several years to strengthen our national security space posture. I look forward to continuing to work with Congress, with our interagency colleagues, U.S. industry, and our international allies and partners to secure the advantages of space for our national interests. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, General Thompson.
Chairman Cooper, Ranking Member Turner, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in my capacity as Vice Chief of Space Operations, United States Space Force. On behalf of the Chief of Space Operations, General J. Raymond, and joined by these outstanding national security space leaders on the panel, it's a pleasure to provide you details today on the stand-up of the newest U.S. military service and inform you of our plans for the coming year. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Congress for its bipartisan support in establishing the U.S. Space Force on December 20th, 2019, and your leadership in addressing the threats and challenges the nation faces in space. Year 1 of the Space Force's existence has been focused on standing up this new service. With purposeful outreach to and the collaboration of Congress, U.S. Space Force has made tremendous strides in the first year, establishing and resourcing the organizational blueprint for the service, moving aggressively in the areas of human capital, force design, acquisition integration, and providing the foundations to establish a truly digital service, all while executing our critical space missions around the clock and without fail. General Raymond's direction for year 2 is the integration of the Space Force into the joint force, the interagency, and with our allies and partners, even as we continue to build out the service. While we've completed the congressional requirement to establish a service within 18 months, build out of the Space Force continues and will take several more years. We have established the first Field Command, Space Operations Command, and completed the organizational design of the remaining 2, Space Systems Command and Space Training and Readiness Command, with anticipated stand-up of those 2 commands later this year. Space Operations Command is responsible for preparing and presenting forces to U.S. Space Command and other combatant commands. Space Systems Command will develop and field world-class space capabilities for our space forces and drive agility and speed into the acquisition process. And Space Training and Readiness Command will recruit, develop, and train Guardians to protect the high ground of space. As part of Year 2's integration activities, the Space Force will place increasing emphasis on strengthening relationships with existing partners and establishing relationships with new partners. This starts with the organizations represented here today. It extends to the other services, combatant commands, and our allies and other international partners. The United States as a whole, and the U.S. Space Force in particular, are much stronger when these relationships are strong. Next, General Raymond and the entire leadership of the Department of the Air Force remain committed and adamant that we must increase the pace of space acquisition. Maintaining program delivery timelines of the recent past will not outpace the threat. We must go faster. The Space Force will continue to smartly leverage the 804 authorities granted by Congress, and we will partner with industry and academia to leverage technology and innovation of the commercial sector. Our adversaries have recognized the importance of such an approach to national security space. In my opinion, the creativity, ingenuity, and innovation of the American mind is one of our greatest assets. We must leverage that fully in this endeavor. Our people, our guardians, are critical to the success of the Space Force. We are adopting new and innovative human capital and talent management approaches for both civilians and military members alike, under the authorities granted by Congress and with your assistance. In addition, the recent release of the Vision for Digital Service seeks to build the fluency of that workforce and prepare and posture them in the service to be more agile and innovative in the future. Finally, the U.S. Space Force will continue to partner with other agencies in the executive branch and Congress to promote responsible behavior in space and a secure, stable domain accessible to all for peaceful purposes. Our service's inception is an unprecedented opportunity. Our success to date could not have been possible without a passionate and energetic group of guardians, a fully committed partnership with the Departments of the Air Force and Defense, and the support of Congress. On behalf of General Raymond, thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions and concerns today.
Thank you so much, General. Now we'll hear from Dr. Scalise.
Morning, Chairman Cooper, Ranking Member Turner, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm glad to be here with strong partners, General D.T. Thompson, Mr. Hill, Major General Cleveland, and Mr. Ludwigson. It is a great honor to represent the people of the National Reconnaissance Office. Our agency proudly develops, acquires, launches, and operates the nation's reconnaissance satellites as a member of both the intelligence community and Department of Defense. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to share a reflection on our past year. While addressing the COVID health and safety protocols to protect our workforce and families, NRO ensured the mission continued to meet our commitments to intelligence analysts, warfighters, and policymakers. Due to the incredible efforts of our people and partners, I'm pleased to report NRO systems maintained 100% of their capabilities throughout the pandemic. During a challenging time, we accomplished 6 successful launches, delivering 12 payloads to orbit, many with first ever capabilities, the most NRO launches in a single year since 1984. On the business side, we achieved our 12th consecutive clean financial audit, a feat of financial management excellence unrivaled in the IC. Last year, we also began our NRO cadre internship program, establishing a key recruitment element in our workforce strategy. Turning to today, we are bridging the innovative legacies of our past with cutting-edge vision for our future as we celebrate our 60th anniversary. Since its inception in 1961, NRO has taken quantum leaps in the evolution of overhead reconnaissance, space, and ground systems. Our success can be traced to NRO's end-to-end mission responsibility, developing, acquiring, launching, and operating mission systems. We are a streamlined, flat organization that has a diverse workforce with an exceptional mix of skills, perspectives, and backgrounds. This enables us to deliver on acquisitions while developing next generation capabilities and systems. Adversaries are moving quickly, and so must we. NRO stays out front by developing advanced technologies, leveraging commercial solutions, strengthening government and international partnerships, adapting processes to innovate faster, and baking in resilience from our assets on the ground to our systems on orbit. Our work with IC, DoD, civil, industry, and academic partners enables the U.S. to maintain strategic advantage. NRO sensors give analysts and policymakers insights about activities in hard-to-reach and denied areas and enable indications and warnings. We have close relationships with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and National Security Agency, who task our satellites to provide vital geospatial and signals intelligence that underpins the full spectrum of all source analysis across the national and military intelligence communities. Since the stand-up of the U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Command, we've forged strong new relationships to mutually coordinate activities that ensure that space-based systems that the nation and our allies rely on can operate without disruption in an increasingly contested and congested space domain. Our relationships are important to us. For example, NRO Deputy Director Major General Michael Gutlein and I have just returned from a 2-week visit to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii and U.S. Forces Korea in South Korea. We met with our embedded NRO field representatives and Indo-PACOM, U.S. Forces Korea, and Component Command senior leaders to listen to and understand their needs, priorities, and requirements of our customers. During the trip, we gathered actionable feedback, watched how NRO data systems and tools are used in theater, and addressed future capabilities and collaborative opportunities. This engagement hit the mark, and we are already arranging follow-on directorate-level engagements. By far, NRO's most important asset is its people. Our people make all the difference and will lead us to a future where we can, and as we like to say with a nod to one of our founders, Edwin Land, see it all, see it well, see it now, and innovate faster. Chairman Cooper, Ranking Member Turner, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss NRO's unique value and capabilities. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And we'll hear from Major General Clayton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Turner, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to share a little bit about NGA's mission in the space domain. NGA and our predecessor organizations have a long history of supporting our nation's space activities. And as an organization reliant upon airborne and satellite imagery, we have always made a priority of being aware of activities in space and near space. At NGA, our efforts are spurred by the same sense of urgency that spurred the stand-up of U.S. Space Command. Namely, the Earth's orbit is no longer a benign environment, and the threat to U.S. national security interests from foreign space powers is real and growing. Last year, we rolled out the Moonshot Initiative at NGA, a whole-of-agency effort to maintain and expand our GEOINT advantage in all realms, including space. We've developed a 4-pillar strategy based on people, partnerships, and preparation for the missions of today and tomorrow. The first pillar is people. NGA's workforce has been thriving in the space domain for decades. In fact, we helped map the moon for the NASA moon landings in the 1960s and the 1970s. To maintain a competitive edge, we're increasing our investments in developing our tradecraft and training our workforce for the space domain. And to support our people, we're training our officers in big data management and analysis and growing our artificial intelligence expertise. Over time, this will provide a cadre of experts who can execute the warfighter and IC requirements and develop the next generation of space GEOINT professionals. The second pillar is partnerships. NGA continues to strengthen our strategic partnerships while building new relationships with civilian components of government, with industry, and with our allied partners. Within the space domain, NRO is our lead partner in advancing space GEOINT capabilities, including new commercial sources. And our partnership with the U.S. Space Force is deepening every day through information sharing and collaboration. We are working with these partners to ensure no duplication of effort and to create efficiencies. We also maintain embedded personnel through our NGA support teams, or NSTs, at DIA headquarters, the National Air and Space Intelligence Center in Ohio, and the Missile and Space Intelligence Center in Alabama. And in 2019, NGA established a SpaceCom NST, and we are continuing to grow the NST as SpaceCom becomes fully operational. The third pillar is mission today. Space is vitally important to NGA's mission. It is the environment in which the sensors that provide most of our data operate. We recognize that our adversaries and near-peer competitors have the means to deny us that resource. And so NGA extends the same level of commitment to our warfighters in space. And the recently established SpaceCom NST has embedded NGA's unique capabilities in the command. The final pillar is mission tomorrow. Based on Earth and in space, one of the most critical missions NGA performs for the nation is assured positioning, navigation, and timing, what we call assured PNT. This is the foundation for our foundation. Everything that depends on knowing exactly where and when something is on or about the Earth uses this unique form of GEOINT. NGA is the global leader in providing the geosciences that enable the accuracy and precision of DoD weapon systems, of safety and navigation efforts, and of economic and civil applications that use capabilities like GPS and precision timing. Assured PNT is a mission imperative for us, and NGA plans to invest additional resources to ensure the integrity and resiliency of these capabilities. Finally, I'd like to say thanks to this committee for its support of NGA's Safety of Navigation mission. Your support helped modernize NGA's authorities and addressed our shift from paper to a digital and secure electronic delivery to support electronic-based navigation in all domains. In conclusion, NGA has reacted aggressively to support space and is making progress in the domain. We're realigning to protect U.S. national security interests in the space domain to deter, protect, and defeat our adversaries in space. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General. Now we'll hear from Mr. Ludwigson.
I'll summarize my written statement, but submit it for the record. DoD space systems are important to our national security, facilitating communications, providing real-time global visibility, as well as serving other key roles. For decades, these systems provided the U.S. with unparalleled advantages. Our past work has highlighted problems with DoD space acquisitions, including multi-billion-dollar cost overruns, multi-year delays, and deferred capabilities. Fortunately, many of the programs that led us to these findings are now nearing completion. My written statement highlights the status of several programs. As you may have noted, many of the traditional programs are over budget and delayed, but some are not. Our recent reports also provide some insights. For example, our GPS report earlier this year highlighted that despite having satellites capable of broadcasting a jam-resistant GPS signal for military users since 2005, DoD remains years away from widespread use of it. Similar disconnects between space and non-space elements have happened for other space systems. I want to emphasize that while DoD has already deployed numerous space-based systems, the space elements do not last forever, and systems require periodic updates to continue to meet mission needs. In addition, some potential adversaries now have the means and intentions of holding our space-based capabilities at risk. As a result, we face important questions about how to mitigate the risks to current space systems, recapitalize our existing capabilities, and potentially add new ones. Congress and DoD have taken steps aimed at improving acquisitions and oversight of space programs. In particular, there have been efforts to change acquisition authorities, including the creation of middle-tier acquisitions, which aim to produce a usable product within 5 years and provide administrative relief to do this. My written statement highlights 5 of these programs, including 2 in the Next-Gen OPIR effort, which we issued a non-public report on earlier this year. There are also efforts to provide acquisition authorities specific to space programs. We shared our views on a draft Air Force proposal earlier this year and expect to do the same for a forthcoming DoD proposal. In addition, DoD has undertaken a dramatic restructuring aimed at consolidating space oversight. The creation of the Space Force has captured headlines, but the reorganization moved multiple organizations into the Space Force and created new ones. Key among these are the new Space Development Agency and the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, both tasked with quickly developing new systems. Also, the stand-up of U.S. Space Command is designed to provide unified control over space operations. Looking ahead, DoD faces several broad challenges. First, the stand-up of the new Space Force and the related reorganization may streamline the DoD space enterprise and sharpen the focus on the development and operations of space systems, but brings with it a variety of challenges. Only 2 years ago, we reported that DoD was unsure how many acquisition staff were working on DoD space programs. Moving people and organizations and establishing new lines of authority may bring growing pains, could distract from their mission, if not managed well. Second, paying for cost overruns for older systems while attempting to recapitalize and replace some or all of those systems could be challenging. Notably, DoD is developing or planning at least 10 space programs in nearly every mission area, including communications, missile warning, command and control, launch, and position navigation and timing. Finally, balancing efforts to enhance acquisition authorities with ensuring opportunities for effective oversight will be important. The record on DoD space acquisitions is replete with examples of cost overruns and missed schedules. Oftentimes, people point to the ubiquitous paperwork as the cause of the slow process. However, I urge the subcommittee to consider what I call the first principles behind the paperwork. I'd argue that we need agreement on a few things. These are the first principles: to build strong programs and the ability to oversee them. It's not a given that DoD will repeat its past mistakes. We have identified and shared leading practices to improve acquisition outcomes, including building strong oversight into programs, using data and demonstrable knowledge to anchor decisions, empowering program managers to make decisions but holding them accountable for their choices, and canceling unsuccessful programs. Adopting these leading practices could help DoD achieve faster delivery of new capabilities, especially if DoD balances new streamlined acquisition processes with sufficient oversight to help ensure program success. Chairman Cooper, Ranking Member Turner, this concludes my statement. I would be happy to answer any questions the subcommittee members may have.
Thank you very much. It's always good to hear from GAO. We will now question the witnesses and try to limit every member to 5 minutes so that we can distribute the questions as much as possible. Let me begin with Mr. Ludwigsen. I think it was in 2016, there was a report from GAO that said there were some 60 people within DoD who had the power to say no over then Air Force space programs. And most members of the Armed Services Committee thought that was way too many naysayers and could be one reason for the delay. You mentioned that the new Space Force is somewhat streamlined. How many naysayers are there today? Are there still 60? Has the number gone up or down?
We haven't updated that work at this point, but as you know, the stand-up of Space Force is an ongoing process. Components have been moved around. I'm not sure that the Space Force itself is in its final form. I suspect, as you may recall from that fragmentation report, there were a wide number of agencies who were involved in the decision-making process that went into space acquisitions, and not all of those have been moved into Space Force. Even if the entities who are not going to move into Space Force remain independent, it's going to be important for the entities to coordinate their activities because space is so connected, as a couple of the speakers mentioned, especially in the context of multi-domain operations. So much of it is connected to one another, both at the service level and Space Force and NRO, for example. That's a relationship that's going to have to remain very strong.
I think you and GAO have pointed out that there's some 8,000 people involved in 50 different organizations, and it's been kind of hard to even keep up with that part of things. But I think the overall thrust here is we need to be able to field systems that work and field them faster. I personally would love to see them under budget, but it's even more important that they be working systems, not like the 2005 disaster where we have the capability we haven't been able to use, even though the satellite's been up there ready to use it all that time. Sometimes it's a satellite, sometimes it's ground stations, sometimes it's people don't even know what it is. But in the effort to get things to move faster, I couldn't help but be impressed by the NRO's announcement. Even during COVID, they were able to have 6 successful launches with 12 major payloads. That's pretty impressive. And I know that's a mature organization, but that's the organization that I think most members of the Armed Services Committee had in mind when we were thinking about how the Space Force should be run. Streamlined, flat, plenty of diversity, and get the job done, oftentimes with little fanfare. So I know that General Raymond is working hard on this, General Thompson, others, and I know there are going to be inevitable birthing pains, and aren't there something like 10 804 programs going on right now? And I hope they all yield great results because I'm certainly feeling the pressure from the foreign threats. Mr. Hill, your excellent report mentioned that you've come up with 2 theories of deterrence: deterrence by denial and also deterrence by cost. Could you flesh those out a little bit more? To me, it sounds like one is absolute deterrence and the other is more like situational deterrence. How would you describe those?
Chairman Cooper, yes, that was the report that we submitted last year to Congress. So longstanding deterrence theory, you have always had deterrence by denying the benefits of attack, as well as deterrence by the potential imposition of unacceptable costs. What we're describing in that report is with respect to the space domain, and the focus of the report was supposed to be space deterrence. We said in the space domain, the reliance of the United States on space means that adversaries see a potential benefit in attacking us in space. And so we have to very much focus on the mission assurance that will reduce the benefits of attack. And what you're focused on is deterring military aggression overall. You don't want your adversary to see military aggression as an option, as a viable option for pursuing their political objectives. So we think that there may be cost imposition in other domains. There may certainly be reason to deny someone's use of a particularly threatening space capability, but for the most part, the balance on deterrence with respect to space focuses on assuring our capabilities, which I think is exactly where you're going with your focus on getting our acquisition to move faster.
Well, it sounds like in plain English, our first choice is deterrence by denial. And then if we can't get that, then we impose costs. So that's second best or third best deterrence, when we might not necessarily be able to eliminate any benefit they might get.
Yes, the point though, I think on imposing costs is it's always there. It just might be in a different domain. This gets to the sense of the cross-domain and integrated deterrence.
Well, certainly modern warfare reaches many domains. It will certainly always include space, I guess. Let me turn now to the ranking member, see what questions he's got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to share your affinity for GAO. There's been a tremendous amount of important legislation and policy changes that have come out of GAO reports. I don't have a question for Mr. Ludwigson. I just want to comment that he had the best summation I've ever heard from GAO. They have some programs that are late and over budget, some are not. The good news part of that, some are not, was the addition that I appreciated. So I've two questions for General Thompson and General Cleveland. I'm going to start with you, General Thompson. General Cleveland states in his opening statement that Earth's orbit is no longer a benign environment. We have threats from foreign nations. It's basically an understanding that space is now becoming a warfighting domain. Now, Mr. Hill talked about deterrence, which of course is a more difficult thing to accomplish because it's not just operational, that's affecting the assessment by your adversary. But we do talk about deterrence, we talk about redundancy, we talk about resiliency. We now see threats to space from the ground, threats to space in space. We see in the future, maybe threats from the ground from space. So clearly we must change. We're looking to ways in which we can also rely on commercial access. What are the things that you think that we need to be doing immediately, and how quickly can we do them? General Thompson.
So, Representative Turner, thanks so much for that. There are a whole host of answers to that question, but certainly in interest of time, I'll just limit myself to two. The first is, and probably the most significant gaps and limitations we've had are specifically related to the fact that space has only recently become a warfighting domain. The first is we don't have a truly operational intelligence enterprise for space. We've for years done great work foundationally. The National Air and Space Intelligence Center is one of those centers that's done it foundationally, but extending that to our tactical units, our operational units, a deep understanding of the capabilities of our adversaries in the domain, what their tactics are, training intelligence professionals in that regard to be able to do that. That's one of the limitations we have, but we're moving out very rapidly. I think, as you're aware, here in January, we became the 18th member of the intelligence community. We've put together a plan to establish a National Space Intelligence Center. We're rapidly building the capability to train our own space-focused intelligence professionals. And so we're moving out aggressively in that regard, but we have a lot of ground to cover. The second area I'll talk about is what I'll call the test and evaluation enterprise. And that is, we know how to test our systems to operate effectively in space against natural hazards and for a long period of time. We've never had to design and field and operate them in the face of threats. And so building out a test and evaluation enterprise that allows us to, both in modeling and simulation and other means, understand that our systems will perform effectively and respond effectively in the face of attack and threat is another area that we have to move out in quickly. And I think we have work to do now and in the future.
Well, General Thompson, I've had this conversation with General Raymond, as you indicated, intel being one of the most important aspects. One of the things that we don't want to do is cannibalize our existing systems. As we expand our operations, our capabilities, and expertise, we certainly don't want to weaken those that we have. So I'm very concerned as the opportunity for stovepiping that might come as we expand those intel operations. So I'll certainly be looking at that very closely and having that conversation with you. General Thompson, General Cleveland, General Raymond has done a great job in making certain that the information that we do have about what our adversaries are doing is declassified. This is incredibly important for policymakers to be able to have open discussion, but also so the general public and our allies can see what our adversaries are doing. I always point out that our allies' legislative bodies do not have access to intelligence information or even a congressional research service like we do. Getting information out in the public domain actually puts information in the hands of those parliaments and legislators. I'd like each of you to talk about the importance of making certain that we declassify this information. We're always so worried about means, methods, and techniques, but I think we also need to worry about ends, and that is what are our adversaries attempting to do. And by identifying that, we can then empower you to fashion responses. General Thompson, General Cleveland, if you could talk about the issue of declassification.
Representative Turner, just a few comments, and then I'll pass it to General Cleveland. You're absolutely right in that regard. I think our overclassification and tendency to overclassify is still a little bit of the vestige of the Cold War mindset and the fact that we had such incredible and exquisite capabilities that others didn't. Because of the fact that we now need to operate more broadly in coalitions, we need to make sure that our leaders and the public are aware of our capabilities, our threats, and what we're doing about it. Really does drive the need to declassify. I will also say that we've made some significant steps in that regard, more to go, but I would also say that both the National Air and Space Intelligence Center and DIA recently published some very, very good unclassified products on the threats we face. And they have been more forthcoming in those products than we've seen in many years. And I would start there as a great means to operate our friends, our allies, the public, and others in terms of the threats that we face. I'll pass to General Cleveland.
Sir, good morning again, and thank you for the question. Absolutely agree with the need to be publishing at an unclassified level or being prepared to declassify as needed. I think whether it's in space or whether it is in the broader efforts that we're doing as an agency, it's clear that we are, as a nation, competing in the information environment on a daily basis. And we think that at NGA, we have a huge role and quite a bit to contribute to that. In some instances, I think it is an effort to declassify, but I think we also need to be focused on how can we publish at a level that can be released immediately and enable both policymakers and decision makers to share that information as needed. In terms of our partners, of course, we maintain very strong relationships with a number of allied partners, and the vast majority of the production that we provide is at a releasable level, at our 5I level and at some of the other levels. And so every step we take is a recognition that we are competing in the information environment, and we think that we do have a huge role in not only being prepared to declassify as needed, but also to produce and to collect at an unclassified level to support our policymakers.
Last question. Continuing resolutions have a tremendous effect on DoD and all of our operations across our agencies. Sadly, the fiscal year is statutorily set. Congress could move it to December 31st, which I think every year would save DoD about 3 months of backlog. I've been an advocate for that. I always wanted to take an opportunity because I think that the area of space is probably even more particularly impacted by continuing resolutions, to give anyone who's on our panel an opportunity to chime in and to give us some additional fodder on the evils and the effects to your operations and your area of continuing resolutions.
Representative Turner, General Thompson, just briefly, I would say from the aspect of space and primarily speaking for the Space Force, there is an additional effect for a couple of reasons. One is there has been mention of some of the programs we have ongoing, the authorities we're using, but also we are in the process of starting new programs. I will tell you that while certainly we want folks to maintain their oversight and of those programs, right now we're in pretty good stead in terms of the performance of the programs. But because we are trying to start new programs with new capabilities, specifically focused on defending and protecting and other things, and because in fact some of the changes we need to make, some of the mission transfers and some of the establishment of new authorities do require passage of law, we're probably more affected than others in a general sense, just because of the critical need to begin those programs focused on the shortfall of defending and protecting, and because we need to continue to build out the organizations and the capabilities required to act as a service focused on the warfighting domain of space.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd add to what General Thompson said in saying that it does delay the start of new programs, but it also has an impact on what we're doing with continuing programs that may delay also some of our ability to continue those programs on the pace that we had, and may require some degree of reprogramming before we can go forward.
Mr. Chairman, I saw Mr. Hill reach for the microphone. I don't know if we have any time remaining.
Just to underscore what General Thompson said, and what really Ranking Member Turner, what you said as well about the problems of continuing resolutions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Points well taken. Before I yield to first Mr. Carbajal, then Mr. Wilson, Mr. Horsford, and Mr. Lamborn, let me point out the obvious, that all the growing pains of the Space Force, the various tasks that need to be done, were apparently things that the Air Force was not doing when they were in charge of this domain. So I'm thankful that Space Force is doing it, but I'm sorry that we're having to rebuild what probably should have been built before. Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. At least it's good morning in California. I know it's about to be lunch out there. General Thompson, Vandenberg Air Force Base is located in my district. In the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, I requested a report outlining the requirements for sustaining and improving the physical infrastructure of space launch ranges. The report noted that the diversity of launch providers, payload customers, and weapon systems testers are at an all-time high, which often requires infrastructure modifications, enhancements, and modernization to meet the mission needs of the customers. My office has been trying to get additional information from the Space Force on a point in the report that states a challenge the ranges face is the limitation of commercial investment of mutually beneficial projects. The report says that the Space Force is seeking to address this challenge through changes to the Commercial Space Launch Cooperation Statute. Can you elaborate what changes are you considering in this area?
Representative Carbajal, yes, I can. And sir, if I may make a minor point of correction for you, as of May 14th, Vandenberg Space Force Base is now a part of your district. We were able to rename that base on the 14th of May. Yes, sir. As you stated, so we believe that launch, and absolutely, I think most believe that launch is a national security asset, but it's not just a matter of a national security asset for for launching national security payloads. The economic and commercial aspects of launch also have important national security implications. But the launch enterprise, as we understand it today, is in a period of growth and evolution, and we need to adapt some of our policies and procedures and processes to adjust. Among them is what we call our Range of the Future initiative, and what we're doing in that regard is working hard to ensure that our Space Force processes for safety, for range operations, for support, to protect the public are not inhibitors first in the way that launch providers need to provide their operations, and also to reduce the costs that they incur when they come to our national launch ranges. So the Launch Range of the Future initiative seeks to do that. And as you said, part of that effort is to find ways to be able to partner with those commercial activities to share the cost, and also if they have specific desires and needs to help upgrade the infrastructure, to let them do that. We'll work with your office and with the OSD staff to provide you additional details in that regard, but it is a request to make some adjustments to the way costs are shared, costs are incurred, and investments are allowed with the commercial sector.
Great. I would appreciate it if your team can follow up with my staff. General Thompson, just to continue, building off my previous question, I understand that ranges annually compete for facility sustainment, restoration, modernization funds to sustain, repair, and construct projects. The focus on these efforts is to sustain existing infrastructure rather than growing capability to meet the diverse user base of the launch ranges. To the extent the focus to growing capabilities in addition to sustainment, does the Space Force require additional funds, or would it require a policy change?
Representative, I think I'd refer back to the previous question. Certainly, modernization and sustainment of our infrastructure is a challenge, not just on the ranges, but across the space enterprise. We have locations, and we have 134 locations worldwide, all with their own unique challenges. We seek to budget sustainment funds at the appropriate level to cover all and attack those challenges where the priorities lie. As with all activities, more resources to help us work on those infrastructure challenges never hurt. I would say adequate resourcing exists, but additional resourcing is never, there's always use for additional resources, but that coupled with some of the potential policy changes we talked about in the last question would definitely be helpful.
Great. And lastly, no response is needed, but I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to urge you to consider Vandenberg Space Force Base to be the future home of STARCOM. So with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Jim Cooper and Ranking Member Mike Turner, for coordinating this very important hearing today. And we are so grateful as to the dedicated personnel that we hear who are speaking. And thank you so much for your service to our country. As a 31-year veteran of the Army National Guard myself, and a grateful dad of 3 members of the National Guard, I strongly support a Space Force National Guard. And I'm encouraged by reports that the force is working toward this creation. National Guard units have conducted space operations for the past 25 years and can provide the same surge support to our space operations that it does to other domains. With that, General Thompson, the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act requires the Department to submit a draft plan to the House and Senate Armed Services Committees. What is the status of the plan, and what do you need from this committee?
Representative, thanks so much for that question. I will tell you that today, before we even talk about the future, in the past and today, both the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserve have been critical members and critical part of the space mission for decades, as you noted. Without them, we could not execute our full suite of missions today. They're an incredibly valuable partner. We have taken this opportunity, however, to look at the Guard, Reserve, and regular construct and assess whether or not there are an approach that we could take that adjusts that for the future. We've been working closely with the Office of Secretary of Defense. I think we're close to approval of that report from the Secretary of Defense and submission to Congress. I think it does two things. First of all, it relies on tried and true and proven capabilities that we've used in the past and structures that we've used in the past to great effect and we believe will be useful in the future. There's also an aspect of it I think you'll see that increases our flexibility, increases our permeability, and allows us to both address force structure issues for the Space Force, but the needs of our guardians over time as well. That report is in final stages of coordination and I believe close to delivery, and we'll look forward to working with Congress on the implementation of that report when it's delivered.
And thank you very much, General. And again, the capabilities of citizen soldiers can be so positive, as you know. And then, General, you highlight the importance of multinational space war games in creating integrated deterrence and identifying how our capabilities complement those of our allies and vice versa. These exercises, common in other warfighting domains, require partners with developed operational concepts and commitment to force designs for their own space forces. What is the current maturity of our allies' space capabilities, and are we doing everything we can to coordinate them in wargaming and experimentation?
Yes, sir. So over the last decade, our allies and partners have made tremendous gains, tremendous progress. One of the things that we've done is the Schriever war game that has been in place since around the turn of the century, around 2000. We have greatly expanded to include allied participation. We include participation at the policy level, at the ministerial level, and also in terms of operational capabilities, tactics, techniques, and procedures. That has done a tremendous amount for them to open up their eyes in terms of the threats, in terms of the challenges, and specifically the capabilities that they need to provide and bring to the table to help us operate more effectively as a coalition and a set of nations. We continue that activity today, and we're looking at increased investment from our Five Eyes partners, the UK, Canada, Australia, the New Zealand, but also the French, the Germans, the Japanese, all are looking to increase their investment in span capability.
And it's really encouraging. Also Korea. And Secretary Hill, commercial satellite companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are poised to introduce thousands of new satellites over the next decade. Ensuring appropriate oversight of the partnerships with our innovative private industry is a careful consideration of the committee. What is the department doing to reduce costs by embracing the military, commercial, public-private, hybrid acquisition approaches to national space security challenges?
Thank you, Congressman. Both in the Defense Department and I think our colleagues from the intelligence community would say is that we are focusing on using both the services, the new services that commercial space provides, launch area, space-based Earth imaging, satellite communications, and of course the broadband capabilities that you spoke about, some of the people providing. We're also seeing so much innovation in the way they design their architectures, and that is being brought into the way we think about how to design our own architectures, giving a lot of new opportunities to diversify, add resilience, and reduce costs.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Horsford.
Well, thank you, Chairman Cooper. It's great to be here. This is my first meeting for the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, and as one of the newest members on ASK, I'm looking forward to working with all of my colleagues on these important issues. Thank you also to our witnesses for testifying today. As we know, the purpose of today's hearing is to explore national security space activities for the Department of Defense, including within the U.S. Space Force. I actually had the honor of joining Acting Secretary of the Air Force John Roth 2 months ago when he visited Nellis Air Force Base located in my district. During Secretary Roth's visit, we were both briefed on our nation's defense and training capabilities, including the Advanced Battle Management System and Red Flag exercises. War fighters at Nellis Air Force Base are helping the Air Force build a more integrated and lethal force through advanced battle management system development. the Air Force's network solution to enable rapid decision-making that powers joint all-domain command and control. So as we modernize our Air Force, we must also find ways to process and share data faster than our adversaries. ABMS will allow the Air Force to transition its legacy command and control infrastructure into joint virtual systems that enable all equipment to communicate seamlessly, creating more agile and mobile warfighters. So General Thompson, you stated in your testimony that the Joint All-Domain Command and Control and ABMS are the most important efforts to joint force to undertake to prepare for future conflicts. Can you elaborate on that for us just briefly for a moment?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And as you described, the future of conflict, we believe, is the ability to sense rapidly, take the data that you need, formulate it, collate it, fuse it, put it in the proper place and format so that either through machine learning and artificial intelligence or the decision of commanders and warfighters, that the appropriate action can be taken. And we need to be able to do that rapidly on the matter of seconds and minutes, and we need to be able to do it from sensors that are in space, in the air, at sea, and on the ground, and then apply the appropriate action, whether it includes weapons or other capabilities that the Joint Force brings to bear. And as you said, the foundational capability to do that is the connectivity between all of those sensors and shooters, the ability to share data, the ability to understand what the data is and understand who's using it. And as you said, ABMS is a key part of that. A large part of that relay will need to occur through space. And in addition, as part of our contribution to both ABMS and Joint All-Domain Command and Control, the Space Force's primary contribution at this point is through our Unified Data Library. That is the data repository that will be the access point and the distribution point and the availability point of that sensor data, the ability to connect it to those shooters, and then apply machine learning, artificial intelligence, and human intervention to connect the information with the right decision maker, the right action arm at the right time.
Thank you very much. Also, I just wanted to ask briefly about the DoD space acquisition workforce. Mr. Ludwigson, you noted that the GAO, which issued a report in 2019, examined the acquisition workforce focused on space programs, and there were some troubling findings. Can you elaborate on that? And Mr. Hill or General Thompson, what steps has the DoD taken to identify the number of acquisition personnel that are needed for Space Force? Thank you.
We did that work. We actually initiated that work before the stand-up of Space Force was formalized and planned. And we did it to understand whether the department understood the range of locations and numbers of personnel working on space acquisitions. As you noted, the findings were that there wasn't good understanding of all of the locations and all of the personnel. In fact, the department wasn't able to provide that answer. We developed our own methodology and came up with the number of, I believe it was 8,100, couple more. And that was probably a low estimate. I think it was very helpful that we'd done that work. With the stand-up of Space Force, it became important to, as they start to pull together the personnel, they need to make decisions, and so hopefully our work was helpful to the department as they move down that path.
Yes, sir. General Thompson, I'll add to that. Absolutely, the work done by the GAO and Mr. Ludwigson regarding identifying some of those factors and concerns has helped, first of all, in our design of the acquisition organizations and the acquisition approach to the Space Force, also in ensuring that we've adequately captured our resource needs as we complete the build-out associated with that design. The second thing I'll add is not just in terms of the acquisition workforce framework that the overall Department of Defense is using to increase the flexibility of managing its workforce today. We have already also applied some of the special authorities of Congress through the acquisition demonstration program that's longstanding to adjust the means by which we manage that workforce that we have found, both in terms of our own analysis, but others, that the members that are under this management program find that it's more rewarding. They feel like they're more appropriately recognized for their work, and their attitudes toward the work they do in the organization they're in are stronger than others across the force. So all of those have combined, I think, to put us in, build us a good foundation for our acquisition organizations and our acquisition workforce going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
We welcome the gentleman to the subcommittee and to the full committee. Appreciate your excellent questions. Thank you. Mr. Lamborn. You're muted.
There, is that better? Okay, thank you. Thanks for having this hearing, Mr. Chairman. I want to say if both of our hockey teams and the Colorado Avalanche and the Predators continue to advance, we might have to place a bet on the outcome if they face each other. And Dr. Scalise, I want to congratulate NRO on its 60th birthday. NRO has come a long way in 60 years, from dropping film from a satellite to be caught by a parachute by an airplane. You've come a long way since those days. My first question, Dr. Scalise, is we have heard concerns about the number of delivery on orbit and delivery in orbit launches that the NRO has purchased outside of the National Security Space Launch Program. Can you walk us through why that is?
Yes, sir. We typically and principally use the National Launch Services as our principal means of going into space. And whenever we don't, we coordinate with the Air Force and now the Space Force to determine what the best means for delivery is. Typically, when we have not used the National Launch Services, it's because it's typically a small research payload that we want to get up either in a unique orbit or on a short time frame. But as you'll look and see, principally we use the National Launch Services for our missions.
Okay, thank you. Changing gears, Dr. Scalise, there's a tremendous natural symmetry which exists in Colorado Springs between Space Command and our uniformed space warfighters on the one hand, and the many intelligence and three-letter agencies on the other hand. This is particularly true in the National Space Defense Center there in Colorado Springs, where the Joint Task Force Space Defense conducts can't-fail missions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And NRO has an even greater presence on Buckley Air Force Base, which is an hour away by car. So we know from the previous Missile Defense Agency's relocation from the capital region to Alabama that it suffered an 80% attrition from individuals who did not want to make that move. Will NRO be requiring any of its employees to move to if the Space Command relocation proceeds to Alabama? And if so, what would an 80% attrition do to your workforce and your mission?
So we're located at, as you said, on Buckley Air Force Base, which is an NRO facility there that I wouldn't expect to be impacted. I would have to see what the changes would be. We do co-staff the NSDC, as you said, but I would have to see what that impact would be.
Okay, thank you. We'll follow up on that. General Thompson, we know that China is pursuing counter space technologies such as satellite jammers, directed energy, and direct ascent kinetic weapons. These developments will certainly further facilitate the militarization of space and could deny the U.S. and our allies access to space during a conflict or crisis. So from an organize, train, and equip perspective, General Thompson, where should investments be made to our space-based capabilities to ensure that we can prevail in a conflict against China?
Representative Landmore, three quick answers to that question. First of all, the first is we have tremendous capabilities up there today. In many cases, they weren't designed to operate in a contested environment under threat like this, but we're in the process now. We've had a multi-year effort now to build into them a limited set of features that allow them to be defensible, to help in their own defense, but also we're in the process right now of developing capabilities to be able to defend them against these threats. And that's what I'll call step number one. Step number two is, as we move forward, both as part of our design activity, the force design activity we're establishing under our new Space Warfighting and Analysis Center, is by the design of the architectures and the integration of those systems and capabilities, make them more resilient, make them more robust, make them less susceptible to attack and single axis attack, and make it less of an interesting target for the adversary in China to pursue. And then the third piece of that, and the foundational piece really in both cases, is a much deeper understanding of the capabilities of those adversaries in the domain, where they are, what their capabilities are, what their tactics are, and both in terms of active defensive capabilities and design, how do we best approach them to make sure they're effective in response?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, thank the gentleman. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a very bad connection here. If that breaks, I'm going to turn my video off and hopefully be better. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your work and the complexity of the issues before us. I want to go to an area which has been much talked about, and that is the utilization of commercial satellites of many different kinds. How those commercial operations might be integrated into the work that you do. Considering in this discussion, please consider both the classified and the unclassified work. So let's start with General Thompson, and we'll go from there.
Representative Garamendi, two answers to that question, if I may. The first is we need to understand the services and capabilities that commercial providers can give to them in and of themselves, whether it's communications, data relay, remote sensing, and understand how we can most effectively use those services and the data they provide. We have a commercial partnership office today at both Los Angeles Air Force Base as part of the Space and Missile Systems Center, soon to be Space Systems Command, as well as a commercial SATCOM office at Fort Meade in Maryland. They are expanding their scope, not just to look at satellite communications, but all commercial services. And so using that and incorporating that into our force design activities is step one. Step two is understanding the technologies of those commercial companies and how we might adapt them to the specific military needs and constellations of the future. And one of the best approaches and techniques in using that is through the Space Development Agency, as they pursue their initial capabilities to provide a layer that does space data transport associated with the Advanced Battle Management System. As they do that for tracking, working with a integrated missile warning, missile tracking layer, they take military missions, look at these new commercial capabilities, the technologies and operating concepts, and see how we can adapt the technology and the approach to specific military purposes.
Thank you. Mr.
Certainly. In addition to what General Thompson said, I would say that the NRO architecture already incorporates the commercial capabilities into it. It's either replace capabilities so that we can focus on those things that only the government can or should do, or it supplements those capabilities to provide additional resilience and coverage. Further, as General Thompson said, we found great value in the commercial capabilities to speed the delivery of systems, as they have developed some very capable spacecraft that we can go off and use and perhaps adapt to the needs that we may have. And then finally, as was mentioned earlier, they played an incredible role in communications and launch for us. So commercial is baked into our current architecture, and it's a fundamental portion of our future architecture. And to assure that, we continue to work with the commercial providers across all domains to see how we can work together. We do that in cooperation with our partners, NGA, NSA, the Space Force, to assure that we're working together.
Thank you very much. General Cleveland?
Sir, good morning. We really do view commercial imagery as well as services as absolutely critical to the future of the agency as we move forward. We work that, of course, very closely with NRO and Director Scalise's team, but we really believe right now that this explosion in commercial capability, first off, really provides us access that we may not otherwise have. So it allows us to look at more areas. It also does provide to some large degree resiliency as well. In the event there are issues or challenges, oftentimes we can revert to a commercial capability. We think it'll provide us more persistence, again, as we're able to work with the commercial industry to have more of these capabilities up. We think that we'll be able to have persistence over a broader number of targets. And then finally, that drives for us speed and the ability to rapidly get that information into the hands of our decision makers as well as our war fighters. And so as we look at the broader fabric of sources of information and data really coming into our agency, we do think that commercial is going to play a significant role, and it already does play a significant role for us today.
Very good. My final comment would be for GAO to investigate this and make sure that we have all of the opportunities available to us. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank all the members for participating. I know these Zoom conferences are not the easiest things to arrange, but I most of all want to thank our distinguished witnesses and the important work you're doing for our national security. I know space isn't sometimes easy to understand or to explain, but it's absolutely vital to our national security, so I'm grateful for your patriotism. Thank you, Ranking Member. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Let's try to keep the committee focused on these important issues, and hopefully we can have improved space acquisition. That would be a great thing. Unless there's another urgent question from members that they're unable to submit in writing for the record, then this hearing is about to be adjourned, but I don't want to cut anybody off who can't signal me any other way other than the video screen that they have an urgent question. It looks like we're fine, so the hearing is adjourned. Thanks.